Dogs don't understand time the way we do. They don't count days, weeks, or years. They only know one thing: loyalty. And sometimes that loyalty is so powerful, so unbreakable, that it defies all logic. For 12 years, Shadow had never left his owner's side. Every morning, they walked together. Every evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sun go down. Shadow was more than just a pet. He was family. But one morning, something changed. His owner didn't wake up like he always did. He didn't get out of bed, didn't put on his shoes, didn't call for Shadow to follow him outside. Instead, loud voices filled the house. Strange people rushed in. And before Shadow could understand what was happening, his best friend was taken away, carried out on a stretcher, loaded into an ambulance, and gone. Shadow waited. Minutes turned to hours. Hours turned into days. His owner never came back. And then, it happened. Late one evening, Shadow stood up suddenly. His ears twitched, his body stiffened. Something was calling him. Without hesitation, he took off running. Past houses, past roads, past people calling his name. He wasn't stopping. Because somehow, he knew exactly where he needed to be. When the hospital doors slid open that night, and nurses turned in shock, they couldn't believe what they saw. A lone German shepherd, exhausted, panting, his paws scraped and bleeding from the journey. He had come all this way, just to say goodbye. Before we continue, if this story already has your heart racing, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another unbelievable tale of loyalty and love. And tell me in the comments, do you believe dogs can sense when something is wrong? Let's talk about it below. From the moment James brought Shadow home as a tiny, clumsy pup, they were inseparable. It wasn't just the usual bond between a man and his dog. This was something deeper. From the moment Shadow opened his tiny eyes for the first time, he only had one person in his world: James. James had picked him out from a litter of German Shepherd puppies, holding him gently in his hands, looking into his dark brown eyes, and whispering, "You and me, buddy. Always." From that day on, Shadow followed James everywhere. To the mailbox, to the store, to the park. If James left the house, Shadow sat by the door, waiting. If James laughed, Shadow's tail wagged. If James was sad, Shadow rested his head on his lap. But there was one thing, one special thing, that only they did together. The hand trick. Whenever James held out his hand, palm open, Shadow would press his paw into it. No commands, no words needed. Just a silent promise. A reminder of their bond. Sometimes James would smile and say, "See? No matter what happens, we always have this." James was Shadow's entire world. Every morning, James would wake up to a wet nose nudging his hand, and every evening, Shadow would curl up at his feet while he read by the fireplace. Rain or shine, they took long walks together, James talking, Shadow listening, as if he understood every word. Shadow was a very intelligent dog. James would lean down, cup his hand over Shadow's ear, and whisper, "Find me." No matter where he was, inside the house, behind a tree in the yard, even down the road, Shadow always found him. Tail wagging, eyes bright, as if nothing in the world mattered more than that moment. And James would laugh, scratch behind Shadow's ears, and say, "I'll always be here, boy. Always." But one evening, everything changed. James didn't come outside for their evening walk. He didn't sit in his chair by the fireplace. Shadow waited. And then, the sound of hurried footsteps. Voices, worried, urgent. Strangers in uniforms rushed into the house. They took James away. Shadow barked, whimpered, tried to follow. But James's granddaughter, Emily, held him back. "It's okay, boy," she whispered, but her voice was shaking. James never returned. Shadow was taken to Emily's house. It was warm, safe, comfortable, but it wasn't home. Days passed. Then weeks. The familiar scent of James began to fade. But Shadow never forgot. He never stopped waiting. And then, one night, something changed. He was curled up by the door when it happened, a jolt in his chest, a feeling deep inside him. A pull. A whisper, almost too quiet to hear. Find me. His ears perked. His heart pounded. And before Emily could stop him, Shadow ran. Through the yard. Down the road. Past houses, past cars, past everything, running as fast as his legs could carry him. Because somehow he knew. James needed him. Shadow ran like he never had before. The wind rushed past his ears, his paws pounded against the cold pavement, his heart drummed against his ribs. He didn't know how far or how long he had to go, he just knew he had to get there. Emily's shouts faded behind him, drowned out by the only sound that mattered, the desperate beat of his own heart and the quiet, aching whisper in his mind. Find me. It was dark, and the roads were unfamiliar, but Shadow didn't stop. He couldn't. He dodged past moving cars, ignored the honking horns, leaped over puddles and patches of ice. His old joints ached, his breath came in ragged pants, but he didn't slow down. Something was pulling him forward. After what felt like hours, he reached the towering glass building. The hospital. Shadow had never been here before, but he knew James was inside. The scent hit him first. Faint, buried under the sterile smells of antiseptic and too many people, but it was there. James. He whined, scratching at the doors. People inside gasped, startled at the sight of the large German shepherd. His fur damp from the cold, his eyes wild with desperation. A security guard stepped forward, waving his arms. Hey, get back. No dogs allowed in here. But Shadow growled. Not in anger, not in aggression, in sheer, unshakable determination. The door slid open for a woman stepping out, and that was all Shadow needed. He bolted inside. Down the hall. Past startled nurses. People called out, reaching to stop him, but nothing could stop him now. Because suddenly, through the maze of voices and footsteps and beeping monitors, Shadow heard something. Weak. Fragile. Almost gone. A voice. Shadow. And then, he saw him. James lay in a bed, pale and frail. His body barely more than a shadow of the strong man he once was. His breathing was shallow, his eyes tired. But when he saw his dog, his Shadow, something in those eyes came back to life. A nurse gasped as the old man suddenly tried to sit up, his hands trembling. You found me, boy, James whispered. Shadow leaped onto the bed, pressing his face against James's chest. His body trembled with quiet whimpers, his tail wagging weakly, his entire body curling into the man who had once been his whole world. James let out a broken chuckle, running his frail fingers through the familiar fur. 12 years. 12 years of loyalty. And Shadow had found him. Just in time. The room fell silent. Doctors and nurses, once ready to pull the dog away, now stood frozen. Something about the moment was too sacred to interrupt. James' frail hand sank into Shadow's thick fur, his fingers brushing against the familiar warmth he had missed for too long. His breaths were slow, uneven, but for the first time in days, there was a hint of peace in his face. I knew you'd come, he whispered. His voice was weak, but his lips curled into the smallest, most content smile. Shadow whimpered, nudging James' cheek with his nose, licking at the man's trembling hands. He wasn't just any dog. He was James' Shadow, the one who had never left his side. Emily finally arrived at the doorway, breathless from chasing after him. Her eyes filled with tears at the sight before her. This was why he ran. This was what he felt deep in his soul, that his best friend needed him one last time. James let out a shaky breath and chuckled softly. Still got that old trick in you, huh, boy? Shadow's ears perked up. The trick. Their trick. James lifted his trembling hand ever so slightly, his fingers barely forming the shape of a command. For a moment, Shadow hesitated. It had been so long. But then, slowly, he did it. He lifted his paw, just like he had all those years ago. A perfect high five. James' chuckle turned into a breathless laugh, a single tear slipping from his eye. His fingers weakly tapped against Shadow's paw, just like they used to do when they practiced together. The moment stretched, suspended in time. And then, James let out a long, peaceful sigh. His hand fell limp onto Shadow's fur. The machines around him let out a single, soft, final tone. Emily let out a quiet sob, covering her mouth as Shadow let out the faintest whine, pressing his body closer to the man who had once been his whole world. But there was no fear, no struggle, no pain. Just warmth. Just peace. James had left this world with his best friend by his side. And he had left with a smile. For a moment, the world stood still. Emily felt a tear slip down her cheek as she watched the scene before her. The monitors had gone silent, the room frozen in time. James was gone. But he had left with a peace that none of them had seen in him for weeks. Shadow didn't move. He remained by James' side, resting his head against his chest, as if waiting for his best friend to wake up. But there was no movement. No gentle pat on the head. Emily knelt beside him, her hand shaking as she ran her fingers through his fur. "Come on, boy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "We have to go now." Shadow didn't budge. He couldn't. James had been his whole world. 12 years of companionship, 12 years of loyalty. How could he just walk away? Tears streamed down Emily's face. She didn't know how to make him understand. How do you explain loss to a heart that only knows love? And then, one of the doctors did something no one expected. Slowly, he reached over and took James' hand, lifting it one last time. And with the gentlest movement, he tapped it against Shadow's paw. A final high five. Shadow let out a soft, broken whimper. And then, with his ears lowered and his head bowed, he finally stepped away. The room seemed to breathe again. Emily wrapped her arms around Shadow, holding him close. "You were the best thing that ever happened to him," she whispered. "And I promise, I'll take care of you now." Shadow didn't resist. But as they walked out of the hospital room, he glanced back one last time. He didn't need to see James to know he was there. Some bonds never break. Some love never fades. Days turned into weeks, and the emptiness in Shadow's heart never quite faded. Every morning, he would wake up and wait by the front door, his ears twitching at every passing car, his heart hoping to hear the familiar sound of James' footsteps. But they never came. Emily did everything she could to comfort him. She took him on long walks through the park where he and James used to go. She let him sleep in her room, right beside her bed, so he wouldn't feel alone at night. But some nights, she would hear him whimper in his sleep, his paws twitching as if he were chasing a dream, chasing James. And then, one evening, something happened. Emily sat on the porch, staring at the sunset, when Shadow suddenly stood up. His ears perked, his tail wagging just slightly. He took a few steps forward, his nose sniffing the air. And then, he lifted his paw. A slow, deliberate movement. A high five. Emily's breath caught in her throat. There was no one there. But Shadow knew better. James had never really left him. With a deep sigh, Shadow turned back to Emily, nuzzling his head against her lap. And for the first time in weeks, his eyes didn't look sad. Emily smiled through her tears and whispered, "Come on, boy. Let's go home." And as they walked back inside, the last rays of sunlight cast a golden glow over them, as if someone somewhere was watching over them. Some bonds can never be broken. No matter how much time passes, no matter how far apart we are, love always finds a way to stay. Shadow's devotion to James was proof of that, a love so strong, it transcended even the boundaries of life itself. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps more people see these incredible stories of love and loyalty. And tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced an unbreakable bond with a pet? We'd love to hear your stories. Most importantly, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another heartwarming story. And before you go, check out the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching.